The transport ship descended through violet clouds, and Velara stood at the landing platform, with her arms crossed over her chest armor. She watched the human vessel approach with narrowed silver eyes that reflected the twin suns. Overhead, her skin held that deep purple shade that marked her as pure-blooded Zitherian, and her long white hair moved in the artificial wind created by the landing thrusters. The war had lasted 23 years and cost millions of lives on both sides. Now the humans wanted peace, and they sent their best commander to negotiate terms. Velara did not trust them, but her people were exhausted and their resources depleted. She had no choice but to listen. The ship's door opened with a hiss, and a man stepped out wearing a dark uniform, with silver insignia on his shoulders. He was tall for a human, with brown hair touched by gray at the temples and eyes the color of Earth's oceans. He walked down the ramp with confidence, but without arrogance, and stopped 3 paces from her. Marcus Webb extended his hand in the human gesture of greeting. Velara looked at it for a long moment. Before accepting the clasp, his hand was warm and calloused from years of service. They began negotiations in the council chamber, where holographic displays showed battle statistics and territorial boundaries. Marcus spoke with a directness that surprised her. He did not make excuses for his species' aggression or pretend the war was anything other than what it was. He acknowledged the Zitherian dead and spoke their names with respect. Velara found herself listening more carefully than she intended. Most humans she encountered were either afraid of her or dismissive. Marcus treated her as an equal, and when she challenged his proposals, he considered her words seriously before responding. The negotiations stretched across 7 days. They met each morning as the suns rose and continued past nightfall. Between formal sessions, they walked through the crystal gardens. Near the council building, Marcus asked about her world and actually seemed interested in her answers. She told him about the singing caves in the northern territories and the bioluminescent forests that glowed during the dark season. He shared stories of Earth and places called mountains and oceans. He described snow falling on pine trees and cities that sparkle with electric lights. His voice carried a longing when he spoke of home, and Velara understood that feeling well. On the 5th night, they stood on a balcony overlooking the city. The buildings below pulsed with soft light, and the air smelled of night-blooming flowers that only grew on Zytheria. Marcus stood close enough that she could feel warmth radiating from his body. He turned to her, and his expression held something she had not seen before. Vulnerability, perhaps, or recognition. He reached out slowly and touched her hand where it rested on the railing. She did not pull away. They completed the treaty on the 7th day. Both sides agreed to withdraw forces and establish neutral zones. Trade routes would open and prisoner exchanges would begin. Within the month, Velara signed the document with her people's traditional blood seal, and Marcus used an electronic signature that glowed blue against the datapad. That evening he came to her private quarters. She opened the door and found him standing there without his uniform jacket and with his collar loosened. He looked younger somehow and uncertain in a way that made her heart do something strange in her chest. They did not speak much. Words seemed unnecessary for what passed between them. He touched her face with gentle fingers and traced the luminescent patterns on her cheekbones. She pulled him inside and closed the door behind them. The next morning he lay beside her in the dim light. His skin looked pale against her purple sheets, and his breathing was slow and steady. She watched him sleep and felt something crack open inside her chest. Something dangerous and terrifying. When he woke, they shared a meal and talked about the future. Marcus told her about one final mission he had to complete back on Earth. A debriefing and formal discharge from military service. He would be gone for 3 months at most, and then he would return. He took both her hands in his and looked directly into her eyes. The promise he made was simple and clear. He would come back to her. He would leave his old life behind and build something new here on Zytheria. With her, Velara believed him. She saw the truth in his eyes and felt it in the way he held her. She watched his ship depart and carried his promise like a sacred thing inside her heart. The first month passed slowly. She threw herself into implementing the treaty and managing the withdrawal of forces she received. Debrief messages from Marcus telling her that things were proceeding as planned. His words were careful because military communications were monitored, but she could read the warmth. Beneath the formal language, the second month brought silence. She told herself that bureaucracy moves slowly and that he was probably caught up in meetings and paperwork. She sent messages but received no replies. By the third month, she knew something was wrong. She contacted Earth's diplomatic channels but received only vague responses. Commander Webb was completing his service. There were complications. He would be in touch soon. 4 months passed, and then 5. Valara felt the promise turning into ash inside her chest. She had been a fool to trust a human. She had let herself hope for something impossible, and now she paid the price for that weakness. Her people began questioning the treaty. Human forces had withdrawn, but trade had not begun as promised. The prisoner exchanges happened, but many of her soldiers reported strange treatment. During their captivity, suspicion grew like poison through her government. Valara pushed for patience, but her own faith was crumbling. She lay awake at night, remembering Marcus's hands on her skin and his voice promising forever. The memory became a blade that cut deeper each time she recalled it. 6 months after his departure, she received an official communication. Commander, Marcus Webb had been reassigned to a classified project. He would not be returning to Cytheria. The treaty would proceed under new oversight. She read the message 3 times before the words fully registered. Then she walked to her private quarters and destroyed everything that reminded her of him. She tore down the star charts they had studied together. She burned the jacket he had left behind. She erased the messages from her data storage. When her hands stopped shaking, she returned to the council chamber. She called for an emergency session and proposed resuming defensive operations. The humans had proven untrustworthy. The treaty was meaningless if they could simply ignore its terms. Some council members argued for caution, but most agreed with her assessment. Within a week, Cytherian forces moved back to border positions. Within a month, the first skirmishes began. The war reignited like it had never stopped. Valara led her troops with cold efficiency. She showed no mercy to human forces and took no prisoners. Her reputation grew into something fearsome. Humans called her the Purple Death and told stories of her brutality in battle. She felt nothing. The place inside her chest where Marcus's promise had lived was now filled with ice. She was a warrior again and nothing more. 2 years passed in blood and fire. The war consumed both species with renewed intensity. Valara rose through the ranks to become supreme military commander. She lived for battle and slept only when exhaustion forced her into unconsciousness. Then came the day everything changed. Cytherian intelligence intercepted a transmission from a human black site facility. The message contained prisoner records, and one name caught the attention of the analyst who brought it to Valara's attention. Marcus Webb, status, detained, location, classified, threat level, high. Valara stared at the report for a long time. Her hands trembled slightly as she read through the attached files. Marcus had been captured by a rogue human military faction immediately after returning to Earth. They opposed the treaty and wanted the war to continue for economic and political reasons. They had held him prisoner for 2 years while pretending he had simply been reassigned. The reports detailed interrogations and torture. Marcus had refused to denounce the treaty or provide intelligence about Cytherian defenses. He had maintained his position despite everything they did to him. Valara sat in her command center surrounded by tactical displays and troop movements. She held the evidence of Marcus's imprisonment in her hands and felt the ice inside her chest begin to crack. He had not abandoned her. He had not broken his promise. He had been taken and held and tortured, and still he remained faithful to what they had built together. The question now was what she would do with this information. She could ignore it and continue the war. Marcus was just one human among billions, and saving him would not change the larger conflict. Her people expected her to be ruthless and pragmatic, or she could mount a rescue operation. She could risk her best soldiers and potentially restart peace negotiations. She could choose to believe that the promise made 2 years ago still mattered. Valara stood and walked to the window. Outside her flagship, the stars burned cold and distant. She thought about Marcus lying in some cell believing she had given up on him. She thought about the future they might have had and the war that consumed everything in its path. She made her decision and called her senior officers to the command center. They gathered around the tactical table and she outlined her plan. It was dangerous and possibly suicidal, but they listened without question. 3 days later, a small strike team,